Michael worked as a janitor in one of the tallest glass towers in New York City. Every day he carried his bucket, mop, and broom with the same quiet rhythm. People rarely noticed him. They hurried past in their suits, holding coffee cups, tapping their phones, and speaking quickly about meetings and deals. The lobby of the building was always bright, polished, and busy. Michael had been working in the building for almost 6 years. He started before sunrise, cleaning the lobby, polishing the elevators, and making sure the building looked perfect for the important people who walked through its doors. By the time the executives arrived, Michael would be in a corner, quietly mopping or wiping windows, blending into the background like part of the furniture. Although people rarely spoke to him, Michael did not complain. He liked his work and he believed in doing it well. His shoes were old, his uniform plain, but his eyes carried kindness. Some of the younger workers sometimes greeted him with a nod, but most hardly looked at him. That was fine with Michael. He had grown used to being invisible. One Monday morning, the lobby was busier than usual. A major meeting was scheduled in the top conference room, and visitors were arriving from different cities. The reception desk was crowded with guests checking in, showing IDs and receiving visitor badges. Michael was mopping quietly near the tall windows when he noticed someone at the entrance. It was a young woman, maybe in her 20s, holding a folder close to her chest. She looked nervous. Her eyes moved quickly across the room, scanning the signs on the walls, the elevators, and the crowd at the desk. She hesitated for a moment before walking toward the receptionist. Michael continued mopping, but his eyes returned to the woman again and again. Something about her movement seemed different. She stepped carefully, as if trying to catch details others might miss. She opened her mouth to speak to the receptionist, but when no words came out, the receptionist frowned. The receptionist repeated a question, louder this time. "Which company are you visiting?" The young woman moved her hands in the air, gestures that the receptionist did not understand. A confused look appeared on the receptionist's face. The people waiting in line behind her started shifting impatiently. Someone sighed. Another person checked his watch. Michael immediately understood. The woman was deaf. She was using sign language, but nobody around her knew how to respond. The woman tried again, signing more quickly, her eyes showing both hope and worry, but the receptionist only shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," she said helplessly. The line grew longer and whispers spread in the lobby. Some people looked annoyed, others just looked away. The woman's shoulders slumped. She clutched the folder tighter and glanced toward the exit as if thinking about leaving. Michael's heart tightened. He placed the mop against the wall, wiped his hands on his uniform, and walked slowly toward the desk. People noticed the janitor stepping forward, and a few raised their eyebrows. What could a janitor do here? Michael stood beside the receptionist, then gently tapped the desk to get the visitor's attention. When she turned to look at him, he smiled warmly. Then with calm and steady hands, he began to sign. "Hello, my name is Michael. Can I help you?" The woman's face instantly changed. Her eyes lit up with relief and her lips curved into a smile. She quickly signed back, "Yes, thank you. I have a meeting. I don't know which floor." "I feel lost." Michael nodded and turned to the receptionist. "She has a meeting upstairs but doesn't know where to go. Can you check the visitor list?" The receptionist blinked in surprise, then quickly typed on her computer. She read out the details. "Yes, she has a meeting with the design team on the 18th floor." Michael signed the information back to the woman. "Your meeting is on the 18th floor. Follow me, I will take you to the elevator." The woman let out a small sigh of relief and signed, "Thank you. I was afraid nobody would understand me." Michael smiled gently. "Don't worry, you're not alone here." As they walked toward the elevator, Michael noticed the lobby had grown quieter. People were watching them, watching the janitor who set aside his mop to help, and the visitor whose silent words were finally being understood. When the elevator doors opened, Michael pressed the correct button and stood beside her. To make her feel comfortable, he signed small comments while they waited. "These elevators are very fast. Sometimes my ears pop, but maybe that won't happen for you." The woman laughed silently, covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes sparkling. She replied in signs, "That's true. I don't have to worry about that." Michael chuckled softly, happy that she was no longer anxious. When the elevator reached the 18th floor, he stepped out with her, guiding her toward the meeting rooms. At the doorway, she turned to him and signed, "You were very kind. "Thank you for not ignoring me." Michael signed back with a humble smile. Anyone would do the same. But deep inside, he knew that was not true. Many people had ignored her. Yet to Michael, helping her had felt natural, almost necessary. It reminded him of his own sister, who was also deaf. He remembered how often she felt invisible when people gave up trying to communicate with her. That memory was always with him, pushing him to step in whenever he saw someone in need. The woman waved goodbye and entered her meeting room. Michael turned back, heading for the elevator to return to his mop and bucket. The moment had lasted only a few minutes, yet for both of them, it felt larger than time. What Michael did not know was that far above, on a glass balcony overlooking the lobby, someone else had been watching everything. The CEO of the company, Robert, had stepped out of his office for a short break. He had seen the confusion at the desk, the impatience of the crowd, and finally the janitor who walked forward when no one else would. Robert leaned on the railing, thoughtful. He was a billionaire, the head of the company, the kind of man who usually heard only big ideas about money and business. Yet here he was, watching a simple act of kindness unfold in the middle of his building. Michael did not look up, did not notice, and did not imagine that his small gesture had just been seen by the most powerful person in the building. For him, it was just another morning, another chance to make someone feel a little less alone. The day carried on with its usual rush, but the quiet story of a janitor, a deaf visitor, and a moment of understanding had already begun to write itself into something far greater. The elevator doors closed behind Michael as he returned to the lobby. He picked up his mop again, dipping it gently into the bucket. The smooth strokes of water across the marble floor helped him settle his thoughts. To everyone else, it might have looked like nothing important had happened that morning, but for Michael, the memory of the young visitor's smile stayed bright in his mind. He could still picture her face when she realized someone understood her. That kind of relief, that joy, it was something he knew too well from his sister Anna. Years ago, Anna had often struggled to communicate with teachers, neighbors, even doctors. People grew impatient when they couldn't understand her. Michael, still a boy back then, had made himself a promise. He would learn sign language so Anna would never feel alone in the world. Over time, he became her voice, her bridge to others. That memory never left him. And today, when he saw the visitor's hands moving helplessly at the reception desk, it was as if life had given him another chance to keep that promise. Across the lobby, the receptionist kept glancing toward Michael. She had not expected the janitor to step in and solve the problem she could not handle. She felt both surprised and a little embarrassed. She had worked at the desk for years, meeting countless people, yet she had never thought about learning even a few signs. Now she wondered if she should. But Michael did not notice her thoughts. He returned to his cleaning, moving slowly, blending back into the background. The busy professionals walked past once again, their attention fixed on their phones and conversations. Within minutes, it was as if the moment had never happened, except for the few who had watched carefully. And one of those careful watchers was still standing far above. Robert, the CEO, remained on the glass balcony for several minutes longer than usual. His assistant had already reminded him twice about the next meeting, but Robert waved it off. His mind was caught on what he had just seen. He was a man used to big numbers and important decisions. His world was full of contracts, partnerships, and strategies. Every day he sat across from powerful people, each trying to prove something. But rarely, almost never, did he see something as pure as a janitor dropping his work to communicate with someone others had ignored. Robert whispered to himself, that was leadership, not in title, but in heart. He did not know Michael's name yet, but he wanted to. He told his assistant, find me the janitor from the lobby later today. I want to talk to him. The assistant raised an eyebrow, confused. The janitor, sir? Yes, Robert replied firmly. The one who helped the deaf visitor. The assistant nodded, though surprise still showed on his face. Meanwhile, upstairs on the 18th floor, the young visitor sat in her meeting room. Her name was Emily. She had traveled from another city to present her ideas for a new design project. Though nervous at first, she now felt calmer. She kept remembering the janitor who had signed to her. His kindness had given her the confidence to walk into this room without fear. As she opened her folder and arranged her papers, she thought, sometimes the smallest act changes everything. Back in the lobby, the morning rush was slowing down. Michael finished mopping the main floor and moved to the side hallway. He hummed softly as he worked, a tune he remembered from childhood. He did not hum loudly, just enough for himself. His job was simple, but he tried to fill it with care. The security guard, Tom, walked over. "Hey, Mike," he said. "That was nice of you earlier. Didn't know you could do that hand talk thing." Michael smiled. "It's called sign language." Yeah, Tom replied. "Pretty impressive. I thought she was about to leave." "You saved her meeting," Michael shrugged. "It was nothing. Just helping someone who needed it." But Tom shook his head. "Not nothing. Most folks here wouldn't even look twice. You did more than most of us would have." Michael didn't argue. He just dipped the mop again and continued. But deep inside, he felt grateful that someone noticed. Later that afternoon, when the visitors' meeting ended, Emily came back down to the lobby. She held a small thank you note she had written during a break. She looked around for the janitor, hoping to give it to him. She spotted him near the far corner, bending down to pick up some litter. She walked over, gently tapped his shoulder, and when he looked up, she smiled and handed him the folded paper. Michael blinked, surprised. He unfolded the note carefully. The handwriting was neat, the words simple. "Thank you for helping me this morning. Your kindness made me feel welcome. I will not forget it." Michael signed slowly. "You're welcome. I'm glad you had your meeting." Emily nodded, her eyes warm. Then she signed back. "You should be proud. You changed my whole day." Michael laughed softly and shook his head. "I only did what anyone should do." Emily tilted her head as if to say not everyone would. Before leaving, she gave him a grateful wave. Michael slipped the note into his pocket, his face thoughtful. He did not get thank you notes often. In fact, he could not remember the last time anyone had written something just for him. And high above, Robert watched again. He had stepped onto the balcony at just the right moment to see the visitor hand Michael the note. His heart stirred once more. He turned to his assistant. "Did you see that?" Robert asked. "Yes, sir," the assistant replied. Robert nodded slowly. "That janitor. There is more to him than people notice." The assistant asked, "Do you want me to call him up now?" "Not yet," Robert said. "I want to see how he carries himself when he doesn't know anyone is watching." And so, the CEO continued to observe quietly, hidden behind the glass. Michael went back to work, carrying the note close in his pocket like a small treasure. He never imagined someone important was watching him. To him, the day was ordinary. To others, it was just another Monday. But something invisible had shifted in the air, something that would soon change his life forever. For now, though Michael remained the same humble janitor, pushing his mop, polishing the floor, and humming softly to himself, and somewhere above, the billionaire CEO still leaned on the balcony, deep in thought, his eyes following the man who had shown that kindness could speak louder than any words. The afternoon sun stretched across the tall glass windows of the building, painting the lobby in warm gold. People were still busy, moving from one floor to another, but the morning rush had softened. Michael stood quietly in a corner, polishing the steel handles of the glass doors. His movements were steady, almost meditative. To him, it was just another day of work. He had no idea that high above, the CEO of the company was still watching him with thoughtful eyes. Robert, the CEO, leaned on the railing of the 25th floor balcony. His office was filled with luxury, but at that moment he found more meaning in observing the lobby below. From up there, Michael looked small, almost invisible among the polished shoes and tailored suits. Yet Robert had seen something earlier that most people would have missed. It wasn't just the janitor's ability to sign. It was the way Michael had carried himself. The calm smile, the gentle patience, the quiet way of making someone feel safe. Robert had built his empire on intelligence, risk, and vision. But he knew deep in his heart that no amount of money could replace genuine kindness. Robert had been thinking about this for hours. His meetings had come and gone, but his mind returned again and again to the simple moment in the lobby. Something about Michael reminded him of his own childhood. Robert's father, long before the family had wealth, worked as a mechanic in a small town. He wasn't a businessman, but he was respected because he always helped people without asking for anything back. Robert remembered watching his father fix cars late into the night, charging less when customers couldn't afford to pay, sometimes charging nothing at all. You never know who is watching, his father once told him. But that doesn't matter. Do the right thing anyway. Robert had grown up carrying those words, though success and power had sometimes buried them under piles of responsibilities. Yet now, watching a janitor help a visitor, those words returned as fresh as the day he first heard them. Down in the lobby, Michael finished polishing the doors. He moved back to the janitor's closet to put away some supplies. As he closed the closet door, Tom, the security guard, approached him again. "Mike," Tom said with a grin, "you're a star today. That visitor couldn't stop thanking you. I think she even asked about your name at the desk." Michael raised his eyebrows. "She did?" "Yeah," Tom chuckled. "Not every day someone writes a note to the janitor." "You better keep it safe. Might be the nicest thing you'll get in this building." Michael smiled, patting the folded note still tucked in his pocket. "I will." What Michael didn't know was that his small acts were becoming part of a quiet story spreading through the building. The receptionist had told another colleague about the moment. A few employees who had seen it were whispering during their coffee break. "Did you see the janitor using sign language?" Who knew? But Michael himself stayed humble. He carried his bucket to another hallway and bent down to wipe a spill. For him, work was work, and kindness was just something natural, not something that needed attention. Upstairs, Robert finally called his assistant again. "Bring me the file of the janitorial staff," he instructed. The assistant returned a few minutes later with a thin folder. Robert opened it and scanned through the pages. There it was, Michael Adams, age 42, employee since 6 years. Position, custodian. Robert studied the photo attached. Michael's face in the picture looked the same as the man below, kind, steady, and unpretentious. Robert tapped the folder lightly. "This man has more to teach than some of our executives," he muttered. The assistant looked puzzled. "Sir, do you want me to schedule a meeting with him?" Robert paused. "Not yet. Sometimes you learn more by watching than by asking. Let's see what else he does when no one is paying attention." That evening, as the building began to quiet down, Michael took a short break in the small staff lounge. He pulled out the note from Emily and read it again. Simple words, but full of sincerity. For a man who rarely received thanks, it felt like a gift. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his wallet. He thought of Anna, his sister, and how proud she would be if she knew her brother's signing had helped someone today. As he sipped his coffee from a paper cup, he didn't notice that Robert was still nearby, passing through on his way to the elevator. Robert slowed his steps and glanced into the lounge. He saw Michael sitting there looking tired but peaceful, holding the note like something precious. Robert felt a pang in his chest. He had seen many employees chase recognition, promotions, and bigger paychecks. But here was a man content with a small thank you note, smiling as if it were a treasure. The next morning, the story continued to ripple quietly. When Michael entered the building for his shift, a young intern greeted him with a cheerful, "Good morning, Mr. Michael." Michael blinked in surprise. Nobody had ever added Mr. to his name in this building before. He nodded shyly. "Good morning." As he started mopping again, he noticed more eyes turning toward him, not in judgment, but in curiosity. People whispered, then smiled politely when he passed. Michael did not understand why. He thought maybe word had spread, but he brushed it off and focused on his work. What he truly didn't know was that Robert had already shared the story during a private conversation with 2 senior managers. Robert didn't name Michael yet, but he asked them, "What does leadership mean to you? Is it giving orders or is it stepping forward when others step back?" The managers had no answer, but Robert's eyes had told them enough. Later that day, Michael found himself once again near the reception desk. A different visitor had arrived, confused by the building's many hallways. Michael, without hesitation, put aside his tools and walked over to guide him. The visitor thanked him warmly, surprised at how quickly he had been helped. And once again, Robert happened to see it from above. He smiled quietly to himself. This man doesn't act differently because someone is watching, Robert thought. He acts the same every time. That's true character. By the end of the week, Michael's days had unfolded in their usual rhythm, cleaning floors, emptying trash bins, wiping glass. But unnoticed by him, his quiet consistency had captured the attention of the most powerful man in the building. Robert finally decided it was time. He wanted to meet Michael face to face, not as a janitor standing in the background, but as a man whose simple act of compassion had spoken louder than any speech. But before that meeting, Robert stood once more on the balcony, watching the lobby below. He thought of his father's words, "Do the right thing anyway." He whispered softly, "Father, I think I've just found a reminder of what really matters." And down below, Michael hummed to himself while pushing his mop, still unaware that his life was about to change forever. The week passed slowly for Michael, filled with the usual routines. He cleaned before dawn, polished during the day, and checked every corner of the lobby to make sure it was spotless. To him, each day felt ordinary, even though a small part of him still carried the memory of helping the deaf visitor. The folded note in his wallet had become a quiet reminder that kindness mattered, even when unnoticed. But kindness, in his case, had not gone unnoticed. One morning, as Michael was sweeping near the elevators, a tall manager in a dark suit approached him. The manager's tone was polite but serious. "Michael Adams?" Michael straightened up, broom still in hand. "Yes, sir. The CEO would like to see you in his office." Right now, Michael froze. His mind raced with worry. He had never been called to the top floor before, and the CEO's office was the highest place in the building, a world far away from his mop and bucket. "Me? The CEO?" Michael asked softly, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Yes," the manager confirmed. "Follow me, please." Michael quickly put his broom aside, wiped his hands nervously on his uniform, and walked behind the manager. His heart pounded with every step. Did I do something wrong? Did I make a mistake? The elevator ride felt endless. Michael stared at the glowing numbers above the doors as they climbed higher and higher. He had never gone past the 10th floor before, and now they were headed to the 25th, the very top. When the doors finally opened, Michael stepped out into a space unlike anything he had ever seen. The carpet was thick, soft under his worn shoes. Large paintings hung on the walls, and tall windows showed the whole city below, shining in the morning light. The manager guided him to a pair of wide glass doors. "Please wait here. The CEO will see you in a moment." Michael nodded nervously. He stood by the doors, clutching his hands together. He felt out of place, like a man who had wandered into someone else's world. Then the doors opened, and Robert, the CEO himself, stepped forward. Robert was tall, dressed in a tailored suit, but his expression was warm. He extended his hand. "Michael Adams, I presume?" Michael hesitated, then shook his hand carefully. "Yes, sir." "Please come in," Robert said. The office was large but not cold. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a grand desk stood by the windows. Michael sat on the chair Robert offered, his back straight, unsure of what to expect. For a long moment, Robert studied him quietly, as if weighing his words. Finally, he leaned forward. "I saw what you did last week," Robert said. "With the young visitor in the lobby. You spoke to her in sign language when no one else could." Michael's eyes widened. He looked down, embarrassed. "Oh, that. It was nothing, sir. She just needed help." Robert shook his head firmly. "No, Michael. It was not nothing. I stood on the balcony that morning and I watched everything. You stepped forward when others stepped back. You gave her dignity when others gave her silence. That is not small. That is rare." Michael shifted uncomfortably. He was not used to praise, especially not from someone like the CEO. I only did what my heart told me, sir. My sister is deaf. I learned sign language years ago so she wouldn't feel left out. When I saw the visitor struggling, I thought of her." Robert listened carefully, his eyes softening. "Tell me more about your sister." Michael smiled faintly, though his eyes grew distant. "Her name is Anna. She is older than me by 2 years. Growing up, people didn't know how to talk to her. They grew impatient. She cried many times, feeling invisible. That's when I decided to learn. It was slow at first, but I kept practicing with her every day. Soon we had a language of our own. She always says I gave her a voice, but really she gave me one too." Robert leaned back in his chair, deeply moved. He remained silent for a moment before saying, "Michael, you remind me of something my father used to say. Do the right thing anyway. You didn't help her because you wanted attention or reward. You helped her because it was right. That is leadership, even if you don't wear a suit or sit at a desk." Michael lowered his head humbly. "I'm just a janitor, sir." "No," Robert replied firmly. "You are much more than that." The room grew quiet again, the sound of the city faint through the glass windows. Michael felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, confusion, and disbelief. Why was the CEO speaking to him like this? Why did it matter what he had done? Robert broke the silence. Michael, I believe every company is only as strong as the values it carries. We build tall towers, we sign big contracts, but none of that matters if we forget compassion. You reminded me of that truth. I want you to be part of something greater here. Michael blinked. I don't understand, sir. I want to offer you a position on our community outreach team, Robert explained. We work on projects to connect with the public, schools, hospitals, organizations for people with disabilities. With your experience, your heart, and your ability to sign, you could help us build bridges. I think you would make an excellent part of that mission. Michael sat frozen. The words felt almost unreal. He had come into this office afraid of losing his job. But now the CEO was offering him something beyond anything he had imagined. I don't know what to say, Michael whispered. Say yes, Robert said gently, smiling. Say yes and let's change lives together. Michael's eyes stung with tears, though he quickly blinked them back. He had worked quietly for years, never expecting more than his paycheck. Now suddenly a door had opened to a future he never dared to dream of. He nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I would be honored. Robert extended his hand once again. Welcome to a new beginning, Michael. They shook hands firmly, a simple gesture that sealed something extraordinary. When Michael left the CEO's office that day, he walked differently. His steps were light, almost hesitant, as if he wasn't sure if the floor beneath him was real. The janitor, who had entered the elevator with nervous hands, was leaving with a new role, a new purpose. But despite the change, Michael's heart remained the same. He still carried the same quiet kindness, the same humility. As he rode the elevator down, he thought not of power or position, but of Anna, his sister. He imagined telling her the story, and he knew she would smile and sign, I'm proud of you. Meanwhile, Robert stood by the window of his office watching the city below. He felt something stir within him, hope, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose. For years he had led through numbers and strategies, but today he was reminded that true leadership began with empathy. He whispered once more to himself, do the right thing anyway. And he knew that with Michael by his side, the company's future would not only be successful, but meaningful. The morning after Michael's meeting with Robert felt different from every other day he had lived in the building. He still woke up early, still took the same bus across the city, and still carried his old lunch bag with him. But inside, something had changed. The weight of years spent as just a janitor had lifted, replaced by a quiet hope. As he walked through the lobby doors, he noticed people looking at him differently. The receptionist greeted him with a genuine smile instead of the usual distracted nod. Tom, the security guard, gave him a playful salute. Even a few employees he had never spoken to before said, Good morning, Michael. He didn't fully understand how word had spread so quickly. Perhaps the managers had whispered. Perhaps the receptionist had shared the story again. Or maybe the visitor Emily had told someone about the janitor who had signed to her. But Michael didn't think too hard about it. He simply smiled back, his heart warmed by the sudden recognition. Later that day, Michael was invited upstairs to meet with the community outreach team. He felt nervous again, wearing the same uniform he always had, but Robert's words echoed in his mind. You are much more than that. The team members welcomed him kindly. They explained their projects, programs for local schools, support for hospitals, partnerships with organizations that served people with disabilities. Michael listened carefully, his hands folded in his lap. Then one of the team leaders asked, Michael, do you have ideas for how we can better reach people who often feel left out? Michael paused. He wasn't used to being asked for ideas. He had always been the one following orders, not giving them. But slowly, he shared a thought. We could offer sign language workshops in the building, he said, not just for staff, but for the public. That way, people like the visitor I helped last week wouldn't feel alone. Even if others learn just a little, it makes a big difference. The team members looked at each other, impressed. That's a wonderful idea, one of them said. Michael smiled shyly, realizing for the first time that his voice, through simple words, was being heard in rooms where he once only cleaned floors. Days turned into weeks. Michael balanced his cleaning duties with new responsibilities on the outreach team. He still pushed his mop in the lobby because he didn't want to let go of the work that had shaped him. But now, twice a week, he also joined meetings where his ideas mattered. He helped plan the first sign language workshop. He contacted a local deaf organization to invite guest teachers. He even prepared a few lessons himself, practicing late at night with Anna over video calls. She laughed proudly as she watched her younger brother stepping into a role he had never imagined. "See?" she signed one evening. "I told you, you were meant for more than mopping floors. But the mop taught you something too. Patience." Michael laughed and signed back. "Maybe, but it was you who taught me kindness." The first workshop arrived quickly. The company cafeteria was filled with employees, interns, even some visitors who had heard about it. Michael stood nervously at the front, wearing a clean shirt instead of his usual uniform. Robert sat quietly in the back, watching. Michael raised his hands and began to teach. He showed them how to sign simple words. "Hello. Thank you. How are you?" At first, people stumbled, laughing at their mistakes. But soon the room filled with eager hands moving together, building a bridge of silent language. When the session ended, the applause was louder than anything Michael had ever heard directed at him. His eyes grew misty, and he bowed his head humbly. Robert, smiling from his seat, thought to himself, "This is leadership. This is what our company needs." Over time, Michael became more than the janitor who had once signed to a visitor. He became a quiet ambassador of compassion in the company. Employees who had never spoken to him before now stopped to chat. Some practiced their new signs with him in the lobby. The receptionist even kept a small booklet of basic signs at her desk, determined to never feel helpless again when meeting a deaf visitor. Emily, the visitor who had sparked it all, returned months later for another meeting. When she entered the lobby and saw Michael again, her face lit up. She signed excitedly, "You changed this place." Michael smiled, replying, "No, we all changed it together." But through all the changes, Michael never forgot who he was. He still cleaned the floors when needed, still polished the doors until they gleamed. He told Robert once, "I don't want to stop being a janitor completely. This building is like my second home. Keeping it clean is my way of caring for it." Robert respected that deeply. "Then do both," he said. "Lead with kindness and keep caring in your own way." And so Michael did. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, Robert walked into the lobby. He found Michael there, as always, finishing his shift. The two men stood together, looking at the polished floor that reflected the lights above. "You know, Michael," Robert said quietly, "I built this company to reach the top. But you reminded me that real success isn't just up there in offices and boardrooms. It's down here too, in the lobby, and the kindness we show each other." Michael looked down modestly. "I just did what anyone should do, sir." Robert smiled. "Perhaps. But you did it when it mattered, and you showed everyone, including me, what true leadership looks like." The two men stood in silence for a moment, both humbled by the journey that had brought them together. As the months rolled on, the company became known not only for its business achievements but also for its culture of compassion. Workshops continued. Outreach programs grew, and more employees joined efforts to make the workplace welcoming for everyone. And at the heart of it all was Michael, the janitor who had once simply picked up his mop, but who now carried something far greater, the respect and admiration of all who knew him. He never sought the spotlight, but the story of the day he signed, to help a deaf visitor, and the unseen CEO who watched from the balcony, spread quietly through the company, told again and again as a reminder that kindness has power. Michael still walked home each night carrying his old lunch bag, but now he carried something else too, a sense of purpose, a feeling that his life had touched others in ways he never imagined, and each time he opened his wallet and saw Emily's folded thank you note, he smiled, knowing that a single act of compassion had started a chain of change, one that would continue far beyond him. It was truly a new beginning.